Kalen Voss stood in a hallway that smelled like burnt ozone and bureaucratic disappointment, listening to a four-eyed civil servant explain, for the third time, why humanity was not yet ready for full coalition status. "Your species," said the Vex administrator, whose name was something unpronounceable that translated roughly to Deputy Undersecretary of Regulatory Patience, "remains classified as provisionally sapient. Emotionally volatile. Biologically fragile. Prone to what our behavioral analysts refer to as, and I quote, creative catastrophizing." "That's a nice way of saying we make things up as we go," Kalen said. "It is not a compliment. Didn't ask if it was." The administrator's eye stalks twitched in the particular way Vex eye stalks twitch when they are trying very hard not to be amused and failing. He stamped Kalen's application with a symbol that, in every language in the Coalition database, meant no. Kalen had seen that stamp twice before. He was starting to recognize it in his sleep. "Try again next cycle, Voss. Wouldn't miss it." He walked out with his hands in his pockets and a whistle on his lips, because the alternative was screaming into the recycled station air, and screaming never got anybody a promotion. Somewhere behind that dismissive stamp, though, the galaxy was about to learn a very expensive lesson. It just didn't know it yet. Here's the thing about humanity's reputation in the wider galaxy: it is, technically, earned. Humans got their coalition seat almost by accident, back when a first contact team showed up expecting diplomacy and instead found several hundred confused fishermen trying to explain to alien ambassadors why one of them had brought a harpoon to the negotiating table. Word travels. Word does not travel kindly. Since then, human had quietly become a punchline in at least 3 galactic languages, a mild insult in 2 more, and a verb in one particularly blunt trading dialect, where, to human something, meant to solve a problem so recklessly that it technically counted as solving it. Other species treated humanity the way you treat a golden retriever with security clearance, fondly, cautiously, and never, ever, unsupervised. What the galaxy consistently forgot, in its smug, multi-century wisdom, was that golden retrievers occasionally save people from burning buildings. The ship Kalen served on was called the Wandering Det, which told you everything you needed to know about Coalition scout vessel budgeting. It was crewed entirely by rejects, oddballs, and the professionally unpromotable, which suited Kalen fine, because at least nobody there pretended to like him out of protocol. There was Threx, a Bakari logistics officer with 4 arms and 0 patience, who once told Kalen that watching him eat was biologically upsetting. There was Ilsa Mero, a soft-spoken Corvani navigator who found human sleep cycles endlessly fascinating in the way you find a broken vending machine fascinating, mostly because it shouldn't work, and yet. "You just turn off," Ilsa said once, watching Kalen collapse face first onto a cargo crate for a nap. For 8 hours. Completely unconscious. On a ship. In space. Yep. That is the single most vulnerable thing I have ever witnessed. Wake me if we die. Ilsu had not, in fact, woken him the one time they nearly did, which Kalen still brought up at every opportunity. The distress call came in on a Tuesday, which meant nothing to anyone except Kalen, who was the only person on board who still tracked days that way. It was faint, garbled, bouncing off a derelict mining platform on the edge of a debris field that Coalition charts had marked, unhelpfully, as unstable, do not approach. Threx wanted to log it and move on. Ilsu wanted to run 3 separate risk assessments before deciding whether to run the risk assessments. Captain Doruan, a Bakari elder with the enthusiasm of a tax audit, wanted to wait for a proper salvage authorization from Coalition Command, a process that generally took 6 to 8 standard weeks. "There might be people alive over there," Kalen said. "There is protocol," Doruan said, like that settled it. It did not settle it, mostly because 30 seconds later the debris field lit up with the unmistakable heat signature of something waking up that should have stayed asleep, an old automated defense Hulk, military grade, whose targeting systems had apparently just noticed a Coalition ship idling nearby like a very slow, very expensive snack. "Options," Doruan barked, in the tone of a man who did not actually want options. He wanted someone else to be responsible for the ones that existed. "We could retreat," Threx offered. "We could retreat further," Ilsu added, unhelpfully. The Hulk's weapons array finished charging with a whine that everyone on the bridge recognized, on some primal level, as the universal sound of "oh no." This is the part where, if you have ever met a human, you already know what happens next. Kalen didn't wait for a vote. He was already moving, boots slapping against the deck, shouting something about the auxiliary docking clamp and the mining platform's old fuel lines, and a plan so structurally insane that Ilsu later admitted, under oath, to briefly considering just letting the Hulk win. The plan, in its full, unedited glory, was this: eject a cargo pod loaded with the ship's spare reactor coolant directly into the derelict Hulk's exposed weapons coil, then detonate it using nothing but a modified emergency flare and the kind of confidence that should legally require a permit. "That is not a plan," Threx said. "That is a suicide with paperwork." "It's got a 90% chance of working," Kalen said, already halfway into a vac suit. "You made that number up." "Yeah, but it sounded confident, didn't it?" Nobody stopped him, mostly because nobody had a better idea, and partly because stopping a human mid-sprint toward a terrible decision has historically had a poor success rate for every species that's tried it. What followed was, by any reasonable engineering standard, a disaster. The cargo pod missed its first target by 9 meters. The flare ignited early. Kalen ended up clinging to the outside of the mining platform with one boot wedged in a coolant vent, screaming something that translated across 3 species comm systems as an enthusiastic profanity, while behind him the derelict Hulk's weapons coil overloaded in a bloom of white fire that the sensor logs later described, dryly, as unscheduled. The explosion didn't destroy the Hulk. It didn't need to. It fried the targeting array, sent the whole ancient wreck tumbling lazy and blind into the debris field, and gave the wandering dead exactly enough time to grab the 3 actual survivors still alive on the mining platform and get everyone clear before the thing woke back up and remembered it was angry. Kalen came back aboard trailing scorch marks, minor frostbite, and an expression of a man who could not quite believe his own plan had worked. "That," Threx said slowly, staring at him, "should not have worked." "Agreed," said Kalen. 10 out of 10, never doing it again. He did, in fact, do something almost exactly like it again 11 days later. But that's a different story. Here's a fact about the galaxy that nobody in the Coalition's official records likes to admit: information doesn't spread through diplomatic channels first. It spreads through gossip, through board comm officers relaying, "You will not believe what just happened," across a dozen shipping lanes, through the galactic equivalent of somebody's cousin posting it online. Within 3 days, the story of the human who blew up a derelict war Hulk using a coolant pod, a flare, and apparently nothing resembling a survival instinct had reached 42 star systems, gaining several dramatic embellishments along the way, including one version where Kalen fought the Hulk hand-to-hand, which he found extremely flattering and did absolutely nothing to correct. Other species started asking questions. Not polite ones. The useful kind, the kind that begins with, "Wait, humans can do that," and ends with quiet reassessments in back-channel Coalition meetings that nobody bothered inviting Kalen to, because apparently even galaxy-shaking heroics don't get you on the invite list right away. The Vex administrator who'd rejected Kalen 3 times was, understandably, less than thrilled to hear his name mentioned in a security briefing 2 weeks later. "The Voss human," he said, "the way you'd say a word you'd stepped in." "The same one," said his superior, a Vex official 3 ranks higher and considerably less patient with excuses. "Explain to me again why his provisional status was denied." "Regulatory concerns. Volatility. He is, categorically, a disaster. He is, categorically, the reason we still have a mining platform survivors breathing. Reinstate provisional field status. Effective immediately." The administrator stamped a new form with visible reluctance, the kind of grudging bureaucratic surrender that comes without an apology attached, because apologies would require admitting the first 3 stamps had been wrong, and nobody in coalition administration was prepared to do that out loud. Kalen got the notice on his personal terminal between a maintenance reminder and an ad for recycled protein bars. It read, in full, "Provisional field status reinstated. Do not celebrate publicly. Real warm welcome," he told Ilsu. "You're in," Ilsu said. "That's more than most humans ever got." "Yeah," Kalen said, and for once, didn't have a joke ready. The real trouble started 6 weeks later, and it did not care one bit about anyone's provisional status. Deep-range sensors picked up a fleet signature nobody recognized, emerging from a region of space the Coalition star chart simply labeled unmapped, which in bureaucratic terms meant we're hoping nothing's out there. Whatever it was old, it was massive, and it was moving with the kind of coordinated, silent precision that made every Coalition tactical AI on record recommend immediate, total withdrawal. Coalition Command's response was, predictably, a committee. 3 separate species argued procedure while the unidentified fleet advanced steadily on an inhabited system with 200 million civilians and absolutely no time for anyone's regulatory patience. "We need authorization," Doruan said, staring at the tactical display like it might blink first. "We need a plan," Kalen said. "Authorization can catch up later. That is not how the Coalition operates." Then the Coalition's about to have a very bad day. What the ancient fleet turned out to be, exactly, mattered less in the moment than what it was doing, which was deploying a weapon that scrambled every shield frequency Coalition ships used, a technology nobody currently in the sector had a countermeasure for, because it predated most of their civilizations. Every rule-bound tactical mind on the comm channel froze, running simulations, requesting clearance, waiting for someone above them to make the call. That paralysis, the narrator would like to point out, is exactly the kind of thing that gets 200 million people killed while everyone waits for a form to get approved. Kalen didn't wait for the form. He'd noticed something nobody else had bothered to check. The scrambling weapon cycled its frequency in a pattern, fast, but not unpredictable, the kind of pattern a human brain, built by millions of years of chasing things that also moved in unpredictable but not really patterns, was almost insultingly good at picking out. "Give me manual targeting," he said. "I can time it." "That interval is under a second," Threx said. "No organic reaction time is fast enough." "Bet." There was no time for anyone to talk him out of it, which, considering the track record, was probably for the best. Kalen locked into the targeting array, watched the frequency shimmer and shift, and fired the counter pulse not at where the pattern was, but at where his gut told him it was about to be. He was right. Barely. By a margin so small that Ilsa later refused to even calculate it, on the grounds that some numbers are better left unknown. The pulse dropped the ancient fleet's shielding for 11 full seconds, enough for every Coalition ship in range to land a coordinated strike that sent the invaders scattering back toward whatever unmapped corner of the galaxy they'd crawled out of. Afterward, nobody on the bridge said much of anything for a while. Threx eventually broke the silence. "You could not possibly have known that would work." "Nope," Kalen agreed. "You gambled 200 million lives on a hunch." "I gambled 200 million lives on the fact that waiting for a form was definitely going to kill them, and my hunch was at least a maybe." He shrugged. "Not exactly a hard call." Threx stared at him a long moment, then did something he had never once done in 3 years aboard the Wandering Det. He offered Kalen one of his ration protein cubes, which among Bakari was apparently the closest thing to a medal. "Don't get used to it," Threx said. "Wouldn't dream of it." The Coalition never did issue Kalen a formal apology, because coalitions, much like cats, do not apologize, they simply adjust their behavior and pretend they meant to do that all along. His provisional status quietly became permanent. The trading dialect that once used human as an insult started using it as a compliment instead, in that grudging, backhanded way languages do. He humaned it, now meant someone solved an impossible problem through sheer, unreasonable nerve, and everybody understood it was a good thing, even if nobody would admit humans deserved the credit out loud. Kalen didn't get a parade. He didn't get a statue. What he got, 6 months after his third rejection, was Ilsu handing him a data slate with a new coalition classification listed under humanity's species profile, replacing, provisionally sapient, for the first time in recorded history. The new entry read, Species, Human. Threat Assessment, Catastrophically Resourceful. Recommendation, Do not underestimate. Again. Kalen read it twice, grinned, and went to go take a nap in the middle of a working shift, which nearly gave Ilsu a heart attack all over again. Some things, the galaxy was slowly learning, you just can't fix.